But can I just say, isn't it ironic, given that you were making the point that we are a balanced audience here, or a balanced panel, that Ofcom spend all their effort attacking GB News and not the BBC?
You know what? I don't have to say this. I don't have to say this. I think Ofcom are very fair, OK? And I think they've got a hard job to do. And we're lucky to have Ofcom, because if you didn't have Ofcom, it's America. And the news channels in America are now so polarised to the point where they're as bad as each other. So I'm going to lose a lot of fans by actually defending the the work of Ofcom.
Like
there you go.
You're bidding for the job of chairman of Ofcom.
Do you know what I'll do? I'll do the Ofcom Christmas party. Because,
Don't you think the BBC are biased?
I think. Well, I think the BBC get sense here as well. They get their Ofcom investigations. But listen, Andy, we can come back to that if you like. Andy, Clive Myrie is entitled to have a view, and he's entitled to worry about a sense in some quarters of growing Islamophobia within UK media.
Is he entitled to?
Well, he probably is entitled to that view.
Of course he's entitled to that view. I mean, I don't think he should have posted that tweet, because it's created this 15-minute segment, this row that was completely unnecessary.
Does he not have free speech to send that tweet?
Well, he does have free speech, but he also has a job which requires him to be impartial. I'm a big fan of Clive Myrie, as you said. I think he's an outstanding broadcaster. I know he sort of failed to declare these payments, and I actually think that's a bit of a storm in a...
Administrative problem.
Administrative problems. Bit of a storm in it. Yeah, he needs some comm support with that statement. But bit of a storm in a... No. But
that story, there was nothing untoward. It was clearly he messed up and he's apologised.
If an MP did it, we'd be thrown out of the House of Commons.
No, you'd be censured just like he has, which is he apologises and you move on.
But has he been censured?
Well, yeah,
you could actually be fined as a member of Parliament, so he got off lightly.
Well, I mean, let's not go down that road. So plenty of there's a difficulty with where you find that line, and again, that's where Lynn can struggle.
But the impartiality actually means not expressing an opinion.
A view, yeah.
And that has to be a self-imposed discipline, that if you're going to be impartial, you cannot have anybody listening to you or anyone on your programme thinking that actually going to take one side or the other. It's not fair, apart from that.
And the point that you made, Mark, actually, it's not whether or not he's biased because he hosted various things for money. It's a perception that he might be biased. Newsreaders should be seen to be neutral and believed to be neutral.
And actually, of course, you served as a government minister, Edwina. You know that the NHS has a crisis every winter.
Well, it does, because it suffers from that permanent problem of socialism, which is infinite demand and limited resources. It's always going to be a little bit like that. But, you know, all the money that this government put in to pay its friends in the various trade unions, and particularly in the health unions, they didn't get anything in return. They didn't get any changes in working patterns. They didn't get the insistence that should have happened that, no, if you're a GP, you can't be part-time and you can't be treating people by Zoom. You've got to actually see the patients.
But
especially when most patients, with respect, are 3 times your age.
Yep.
And you need to be able to see exactly what the problem is. That's what medicine should be about, and there's been none of that at all.
Consultants doing shifts at the weekend, it goes on, because the NHS is an example of a system where you mustn't get ill at the weekend, apparently. Yeah. Andy, what do you want to come back on?
All I was going to say was that I think I understand that some of these deals that were done on pay may not have been very palatable, and actually it may have been quite one-sided in terms of who benefited. But I think the government's sort of strategy was clear the decks. We've got all of these strikes. We just need to do something about them in the short term.
Yeah, but
yes, that's a very expensive way of doing things.
That's a mistake, because if you give in by paying people who are striking, guess what's going to happen in another couple of years? There'll be more strikes.
And the RMT union, who paid huge amounts of money, the rail people, they're going on strike again over Christmas. But can I just say something? I totally agree with you about Wes Streeting. I think he's a very able person. The problem he will have is the same problem Alan Milburn had. Alan Milburn...
Blairite Health Minister.
Absolutely. And Tony Blair both knew what needed to be done, but Gordon Brown and the huge mass of Labour backbenchers stopped them from doing.
I think that's complete, and that's going to be another challenge for this government, because we were saying earlier, the Labour Parliamentary Party has a lot of left-wingers in it, and people like Wes Streeting, who are on the right, the Labour Party, have the right idea, and they know that it needs to be a mixture of public and private to make the NHS work properly.
Michael, you were there on the backbenches, those green benches, for those 14 years of Tory rule. Why didn't the Tories fix the NHS?
Because, you know, it's one of those things, people do not trust the Tories to make radical changes to the NHS.
But
Because the NHS...
But the other reason was we just had health minister after health minister.
Yeah.
It takes a couple of years to learn the job and get your feet under the table.
But there was a philosophical thing. It needs the Labour Party. Just like, for example, if we make massive changes to defence, it needs the Conservative Party to do that because people trust the Conservative Party on defence. People trust Labour on the NHS.
No, I don't think
But they were... Oh, I think they do. Rightly or wrongly.
But look,
I think they do.
Look how well we did when it came to COVID. How well we did with getting the vaccine developed within 10 months and into people's arms with less than a year.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody thought that was ever possible, and it was.
And you can tell
the result was excellent.
And you can tell the rejoin the EU guy. I hope he's still watching.
I'm sure
that if we'd been in the
Germany,
EU,
there's something else to watch.
If we'd been in the EU, we would never have been the first with a national vaccine programme.
International vaccine programme.
One thing, though, on the Tories and the NHS, I take your point about trust. I think that is real. But waiting lists trebled. The number of people on NHS waiting lists trebled in that period of time. And that's not just because of COVID. It doubled before the COVID pandemic even took hold.
Because the
and
GPs were so poor.
Well,
the GP service has been hopeless recently.
Nonetheless, it's a poor record.
I mean, there are good ones, but they are, and they deserve the
I went
praise.
to med school, and you know, in my day, he said, putting on his my day voice, GP had to do 5.5 days solid. You had to do home visits. And, you know, the idea of doing 1 or 2 days a week as GPing and A&Ing, I mean, I have every sympathy with GPs. A lot of my friends are actually GPs. But the problem is, what people don't realise, we've got more GPs than ever before, but they're part-time. They're not actually full-time GPs.
Well, that's what Daily Telegraph. Inheritance tax raid will cost more than it makes. Let's have a look at this detail here. Rachel Reeves' inheritance tax raid may backfire by costing the Treasury over £1 billion more than it makes, economists have said. A drop in investment caused by the Chancellor cutting tax relief for family businesses and farms, risks outweighing the extra income she expects to gain from the changes, according to CBI Economics. Michael, can we believe the CBI there?
I think on this one we can. And, you know, this isn't the only one. In Lichfield, which is a beautiful city, I encourage everyone to visit it, we have a cathedral school. And it's a private school. And it's costing the cathedral school students who are actually having to leave because of this extra 20%. The consequence of which is they are going into the public sector, joining state.
Where do I go?
That's VAT, not IHT.
Oh, wait here.
Yes, but I'm saying it's a similar thing, which is
It's
the
an
point I'm
important
making.
distinction. But I suppose Michael's point is the theme is emerging here. Labour's policies are costing more than they bring in.
Exactly. They make a vindictive policy, and I think it is vindictive to get at the farmers, to get at kids who are in private schools, and instead of actually raising money, it'll cost money.
Well, Andy, I'm not sure. I think the private school tax raid will bring some cash in, won't it?
I would have thought so. I mean, briefly on the private school thing, I actually think private schools have been putting their fees up year on year, way above inflation for a really long time, and we haven't seen this crisis of places. So I'm not quite sure we're going to see it now.
Is it the smaller private schools?
Well, I think that's absolutely right. Obviously, at the very, very expensive private schools, they can charge whatever they like, and there will always be people, lots of them from overseas, who will continue to send their kids there. But what I don't accept, and I actually broadly agree with this Telegraph headline and the CBI about the IHT policy. I don't think that's likely to bring in a huge amount of money, but I don't agree that it's a vindictive choice that Labour's making.
It was brought in originally by Harold Wilson. It was rejected then by Margaret Thatcher. Tony Blair and Gordon Brown looked at it and rejected it because they thought it would actually damage farming. It has taken this left-wing Labour government, because Tony Blair's government was far from left-wing, it has taken this Labour left-wing government to reintroduce it. Tony Blair and Gordon Brown rejected it because of all the reasons that is in the Daily Telegraph, just like, as I said, the smaller schools also finding that the VAT receipts will go down and the cost in the private
Andy, come back,
will
and then
go up.
Edwina.